Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to start in about 20 seconds. Great. Well, we will go ahead and get started. And we're excited to have everyone tuning in today. We're looking forward to a wonderful discussion. And so what I wanted to start with is to just briefly introduce myself, and then I'm excited to introduce our panelists for today. My name is Nicole Hall, and I am the Director of Career and Professional Development at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome you to our conversation today. I have had the pleasure of leading career services teams for 18 years, and I have worked at 3 distinguished institutions: Pepperdine University, Wake Forest University, and now the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. We are an incredibly diverse campus with 20,000 students here in Greensboro, North Carolina. And as I've gone through my career, I have always appreciated the opportunity that we take in our field of career services to innovate and to try new things and to bring in new innovations that will help to enhance and improve outcomes for our students. And so whether it's new technology or new resources that we offer or innovative campus partnerships, we're constantly pushing the needle and trying new things. And so that's really what the conversation is about today. We are going to have a chance to learn about a unique opportunity to discuss a new resource. It's designed to revitalize career services. And this is an innovative new shared services solution. It's offered by Kaplan under the leadership of Brandon Busteed, and also in partnership with Wake Forest University's Office of Personal and Career Development, which I'll refer to as OPCD, under the leadership of Andy Chan. And the goal is to help universities to improve student career readiness and job outcomes. So what I want to do first is introduce our panelists. So first I have Brandon Busteed. And as I mentioned, he is the president of Kaplan University Partners. He's the global head of Learn, Work, Innovation. And previously he was the senior partner and global head of the public sector for Gallup, where he led their work across higher education, government, and foundation and corporate social impact. Notably, Brandon writes and speaks about innovation in higher education. For those of you who follow him on LinkedIn, you're very familiar with that. One of the concepts that he has coined is called the triple threat graduate, and I'm sure he will be happy to share with us about that as we go through the discussion today, as that was featured in Forbes magazine. I also am pleased to introduce Andy Chan. Andy has served as the Vice President of Innovation and Career Development at Wake Forest University since 2009. Andy previously ran the Career Management Center at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, and he's held numerous executive leadership, strategic advisory roles, working both in education technology and also with nonprofit organizations. For those of us who've been in the industry for a while, like I have, you are probably very familiar with Andy's TED Talk that was called Career Services Must Die. And now, most recently, he has actually put out Career Services Must Die Part 2. And I know that that has been very thought-provoking and challenging for many of us in higher education to think about the work that we're doing. And finally, I am really pleased to introduce also Heidi Robinson. Heidi is the Associate Professor of the Practice and Assistant Vice President for Personal and Career Development at Wake Forest University. Heidi joined the university in 2011 and has been instrumental in the design and creation of their college to career courses. She also manages the OPCD's Innovative Career Education and Coaching team. And she also was the pioneer of the Wake Forest Ready 7, which is a powerful competency-based framework for student career and life readiness. And I would say, as a former colleague of hers, Heidi is best known as being one of the most beloved professors at Wake Forest University. She has such a heart for her students and is always looking to support them and their success. So with that, let's go ahead and get our conversation started today. We want to provide you with a good understanding of this innovative program. So I'd like to start with you, Brandon. Can you kick us off and share what is Kaplan Career Core?
Sure, and thanks for moderating and joining us today, Nicole. It's a pleasure to have you. I would describe it simply as the first shared services model that's been designed to help career offices scale and extend their impact. And, you know, when we took a careful look at this offering, we did an extensive amount of market research. In fact, research that followed from a lot that I was involved in my Gallup days. interviews with career services leaders. And one of the first things we've tried hard not to do is to not reinvent the wheel of existing services that are currently offered either by third parties or by university career services offices themselves. And so what we've identified are what I call opportunity gaps that university administrators and career services directors identified as things that they needed, but that they also put into a category of things that were either impractical or unaffordable for an individual university to do on its own. So that's really the lens through which we've looked at this. And we've obviously benefited from an incredible design collaboration partner in Andy Chan and Heidi and the Wake Forest team. But what we've developed here are really three key components to Kaplan Career Core. One is a whole bevy of industry and role-specific advisors. The second component is academically rigorous and engaging online career courses, which Heidi is going to expand on in a little bit. And then the third component is an opportunity for students to achieve an industry recognized credential or skill, which actually speaks a little bit to the triple threat graduate that you mentioned earlier, the idea of students leaving not just with a bachelor's degree, but also with an internship, some sort of work integrated learning opportunity, multiple semester-long projects where they've been able to apply what they learn, and an industry recognized credential. So that's one of the key pieces that we're trying to fulfill in this. So that's Kaplan Career Core in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. That's really helpful. And I would imagine, just like myself, many on the call can relate to the idea of opportunity gaps. There's so much that we want to do on behalf of our students, but in a lot of cases, we're very limited on resources. So I'm curious, Andy, if you could talk about what caused Wake Forest to get involved and to collaborate on the Kaplan Career Core. Oh, Andy, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Nicole. It's great to see you. We've worked together for many years, and I'm really just glad to have you on the line. I really love what you're doing at UNC Greensboro too. So really delighted to be here with all of you who are out there. You know, at Wake Forest, we have a motto, and it's called Pro Humanitate, which means for humanity. And what we like to do is essentially, how do we think about serving all people? So we ask not only our students that, but our faculty, our staff, our administrators, what can we do to make a difference in the world? And so similarly, our team at the Office of Personal Career Development, we try to think about those same things. And so in particular, many of our team members are on sort of industry panels or leadership roles where they're trying to share some of our best knowledge with a lot of people in the industry. Particular areas where we feel like we've really done some pretty interesting things would be in the area that we'll talk about today, career and life readiness, academic curriculum, around how to engage all students, and especially those who are typically less engaged. So underrepresented students, first generation students, students with financial need, and also student athletes. We have found that because of their backgrounds, because of their schedules, they have a hard time engaging with career services. So we've found some pretty unique ways of making that happen. We've done some really unique things under the leadership of Allison McWilliams in the area of mentoring and alumni personal and career development. And then finally, we have a whole team that actually is really very sophisticated about how to use tools, especially like Handshake, and how do we actually integrate those tools to have more data analytics decision-making in our work. And we love to share those things. We actually hold an annual open house a couple times a year where we invite schools to come hear what we're talking about. And so we've always tried to figure out how might we be able to do this in some kind of scalable way. So when Brandon and Andy Rosen, who is the chairman and CEO of Kaplan, came to me and the president of Wake Forest to talk about some of their ideas, they had a vision that they could take what they do really well, which is really being able to think about how do you do things in an online way? How do you do them in a way where you actually can complement a lot of the solutions they offer already through a lot of schools around this area of industry recognized certificates? And also this whole idea of like virtual advising. These are areas where Kaplan's had a lot of experience and had a lot of success. And they were very committed to figuring out how to do this with someone like us, because they just thought we had content and experience and people that could be helpful if we could do this in partnership. I'd say the other thing about Kaplan that's really interesting is that they're very committed to creating long-term value because they've been in the education business for a long time. And also they're very committed to long-term relationships. And so that was something that really spoke to us. We've worked on a bunch of other innovations with Kaplan in other areas for high school students, for working professionals, and in a lot of different areas that are very unique and very honestly fun for us to be doing in innovative ways. And this seemed like another opportunity to do that. So for all these reasons, we're very excited to be part of this venture with Kaplan and offering a Kaplan Career Core.
Excellent. Well, it's wonderful to hear how the partnership came together. And of course, as you said, Andy, we had the privilege of working together for many years, and I have always known Wake Forest to be very innovative, but you can see the balance and really the benefit that comes from this partnership. So that is wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the details of the program. I know I'm going to ask each of you to drill in, but I wanted to check in with Brandon first to see if there's any additional perspective that you wanted to add.
Well, I think a little bit, Nicole. Andy touched on a few of these things, but from Kaplan's perspective, we always operate with the student foremost in mind. And as you all know, the number one reason why students value higher education, it's not the only reason, but it's by far the number one reason, is to get a good or better job, right? So with that foremost in their minds, right, we kind of consider helping students get a good job part of our job. So a lot of people know Kaplan because of our test prep roots. We've actually evolved rather quickly into what I call a work prep organization in terms of all the innovations we're doing to support student work prep. And I think the other thing that most people probably don't recognize about us, at least historically, is that half of our global operations at Kaplan are dedicated to supporting university partners of ours, right? So that is a major focus. So when you think about blending the mission of work prep for students and helping university partners better prepare their students for work prep, this was really a natural evolution of many innovations we've been doing. And some folks are familiar with some of the other efforts we've rolled out this year, like our credit degree initiatives, where we're working with universities to combine college degrees with industry recognized credentials. That's obviously a major component of what we're bringing to bear here in Kaplan Career Core. And I think ultimately, many of us on this webinar today who have been involved in career services for a long time, right? A decade or so ago, career services was largely considered a fringe office that literally existed physically and otherwise on the fringe of the campus. And over the last decade, it's become a real centerpiece of the student experience. And I think in the long run, ultimately, career services is going to become an enrollment driver. Those who are doing a great job with career services and support with students will be attracting students and parents and others to their institutions. And so we're in this for the long run and certainly taking a long view of it. But that's a lot of the reasons why it's been a fit for Kaplan. So hopefully that's good context for those who may be more or less familiar with us as an organization. And then I guess as just a bit of an additional description in terms of what it is, I'll just kind of quickly highlight some of the major components. So I talked briefly about the three major legs of this offering: the industry and role-specific advising, the career courses, and the opportunity for students to take professional credentials. And all of this has been designed in the spirit of serving the member institutions who are going to want to be part of this. Certainly something that augments existing efforts that are going on and being very thoughtful about where those things coexist. When we think about the industry and role-specific advising, we've set out to hire a diverse team in many ways, right? Diverse in their own backgrounds, but also diverse in the expertise they can cover across disparate industries, right? Their experience in industry, but also in student advising. And quite frankly, people who are going to bring a global perspective to career thinking and careers. And so we're going to be designing these opportunities for students to connect in ways where a student who, for example, might be early in their career exploration and doesn't really know what they want to do can utilize these industry and role-specific advisors to kind of feel things out. And then for a student who might be on the other end of the spectrum, right, a senior who knows that they want to go into data science, for example, they can connect with somebody who's very specifically going to help them with some of the preparation and opportunities designed there. So we're planning to offer these across a number of different domains. These domains will probably grow and change over time because we're pegging them to some of the fastest growing industries, the areas where college graduates are being most frequently hired into. And so this is an example of some of the breadth of the advising expertise we're going to offer, but this is obviously going to evolve over time as changes in the market evolve and as input from the members of this are given to Kaplan in that process. And then I'm going to let Heidi describe this more because she's really been the pioneer in this work, but these are the examples of the academic courses that will be offered on the platform as well. They've been designed to be taken sequentially or individually, so they work in a number of different ways for students. And so again, I'm gonna save the big description to Heidi. And then finally, I just will touch briefly on the breadth of the industry recognized credentials and skills that students may be able to get across a number of different industries: finance, accounting, healthcare, IT, engineering, a whole host of different things. And so this is just an example of the some 300 plus industry recognized credentials and skills that students might be able to select from the platform. So hopefully that's just a very quick overview. For those of you who are on the webinar who are interested, we'll send these slides so you've got this in more detail because it was a quick walkthrough here, but I'll hand it over to the rest of you for some other thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. Yeah, that was a really helpful overview, and there was a lot of activity in the chat validating the role that career services plays in really helping to drive and influence enrollment. So certainly a very strategic function, and thus this program is very timely. So yeah, let's go ahead and drill into the components. And I want to start first with Heidi. I was reflecting on this particular aspect, and I know for my campus, we're really fortunate at UNC Greensboro to embed our career readiness within our first year course. However, we don't have a means currently to be able to reach students in the additional levels, class levels, sophomore through senior. And so it would be really interesting to learn about how you all have been doing this at Wake Forest. So can you share some background about the career courses and the impact that you've seen on your students?
Oh, thank you, Nicole. Yes, for undergraduates, I think we all know that the career process is ambiguous and often anxiety provoking. Students don't know themselves, let alone the process or where to start. And on top of that, students just don't enter college at the same starting line. Not only are there varying degrees of readiness, but there are also different ways that students are actually going through the process. And those would include our student athletes with limited time. They might include our first generation students who are looking for new information on the kinds of opportunities that are there for them. So there are significant differences in personal and family resources on top of readiness. So because of this, we created 4 credit-bearing career courses so that we would have a structured way for all undergraduates to gain these career skills. And for us, course credit is the lever to help students. And other universities, it may be slightly different. The course could come as part of the first year seminar and then have a developmental piece walking through the undergraduate experience, perhaps as a precursor to registration or major declaration. It's the classroom intervention that holds students accountable to start and complete the steps that move the needle that we know about as career professionals. And they may not even think they need to get started, although we know that an early and intentional beginning in this process is really critical. And then they're able to do more of this on their own. The optimal solution is to create space in that schedule to do the work that does truly level up all students. And why are our courses different? Well, they're structured using a scaffolded learning framework to start from the very first year with this deep understanding of self and career opportunities that authentically align with student interests. The process in our courses is just more about a good resume. Most students think that that's what they're coming to us to get, but it requires a really deep career readiness foundation, including this understanding of self and the opportunities. We know that the average high school student can name 10 careers. Well, the differences in what the opportunities are in the fast changing economy mean that there is so much more to choose from. Students also need a mindset to maintain resilience through the career process. And after that, we do effectively address the tactical pieces like resumes, interviewing, and networking. Finally, in our courses, as I would say, that last piece as we come into that senior year, it's about how to thrive in postgraduate life, including an exploration of benefits and budgets and mindsets to maintain well-being as they transition out. And I would say, you asked about our outcomes. So based on our Wake Forest students reporting in our first destination survey between 2017 and 2020, our students who completed college to career coursework have employment rate that is 10 points higher, which is significant to us, than students who did not take a course. And while graduate school is an important option for many of our students who took a course decided to pursue and then they secured jobs rather than just choosing graduate school if they did not have a plan. And finally, our career course students report receiving a 5 to 10% higher average salary than the students who did not take the course. Our alumni actually have an interesting role in this too, because the alumni who took a course while they were at Wake, which they had higher levels of engagement with our university, which we typically think of as helping additional undergrads while they themselves are alums. It's reaching back and helping our current students with their post-engagement life, networking, and finding jobs themselves.
Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, and I recall all too well during my time at Wake, just the positive feedback that we received from students, the opportunity for them to focus on their career readiness from the moment that they arrived on campus all the way through to graduation was very impactful, and to have those tips and the guidance for job search strategies. So thank you for sharing that. Let's go ahead and look at the next component. So Brandon, do you mind, could you share some details about the industry recognized certifications?
Yeah, I think what's important to note is that, as many of us know, there's been a widespread movement around badges and certificates and certifications. And although some of those have, kind of been treated synonymously, right, there's important distinctions across those. And where Kaplan has chosen to focus, in general, I'm a big fan of a badging and certificates movement. Where I think it can be problematic or challenging is that there's been a huge proliferation of badges and certificates done that have no third-party validator for them, right? Like an employer or an association or any kind of definable outcome. And so it's really difficult to differentiate yourself, right? If you get a random badge for X, Y, or Z, what we've chosen to focus on for the purposes of this career core offering and the work that Kaplan's doing are credentials that are industry recognized and skill sets that have industry or industry association backed standards around them. So that's really the world that we've been operating in. And Kaplan's been doing that for decades through Kaplan Professional, where we've offered these types of training courses for employers all over the world. What's fairly new is not the training and the courses that are being offered or, going outside the lines of industry recognized credentials, for example. What's new is that we're helping universities now license these types of offerings for their own students, for their alumni. And so that's a major component of what we're going to be able to offer in the Career Core solution. Universities will have the option to select any number of those credentials. So in that whole menu, Nicole, you could essentially turn on all of those and make them available. You could select 10 or 20 or 30 of the ones that you think are most appropriate or applicable to your region. So usually when we work with universities like this, we'll rely on great data from organizations like an MZ or a Burning Glass, which will give us an indication of the fastest growing job opportunities in that region and align some of the credentials that might be offered accordingly. So some of this does have some variability based on the institution and the region, et cetera. But the idea here is that, this is something students can avail themselves of. And primarily, I think, in the what I'll call the nooks and crannies of the traditional academic schedule. A lot of universities are encouraging students to do this over breaks, over the summer, during J terms, right? And in some situations, faculty and deans are encouraging students to achieve an industry recognized credential as part of a course or a major. But for the most part, these are all things that can be done by students asynchronously on their own time. And so that certainly increases the likelihood that we can get an awful lot of students through a program, not just through the course, but to a place where they can get their industry recognized credential and make it part of their CV, their LinkedIn profile, and what they can bring to a prospective employer.
That's fantastic. And I know so many of us on our campuses are having regular conversations with employers who discuss the specific competencies they're seeking, the credentials that are needed. And so the idea of being able to leverage something like this to help our students stand out is exciting. I also wanted to have you talk a little bit about the industry-specific advisors. I think about my own campus, and I know I'm not unique. We have 20,000 students that we serve. I have one very talented associate director of career development, and I have 4 career coaches to support 20,000 students, which obviously can be a big challenge. So tell us a little bit about the advisors and how that aspect of the program works.
Yeah, it's a great point, Nicole, because the way you summarized your team is not very different than how a lot of universities would summarize their team, right? Which is to say they have a handful of incredible advisors. If you're lucky, some of those advisors have had some specific industry background, but not necessarily by design, right? Because they're serving so many students, they're largely positioned as generalist advisors to those students. And by the way, that kind of generalist advising, as you all know, is really critical. What we've tried to do, and I think this is really why this shared services model makes so much sense, is that, this is not a simple investment, right? We're not, creating software that once it's developed has a very, very small cost of service. This is a team of experts, right? Full-time, part-time advisors that have industry-specific expertise, that have coaching expertise with students. And so they're unique individuals. They're really talented individuals. And Kaplan has made a commitment to ensure that we're hiring a diverse set of advisors that reflect the diversity of the students that they're serving. So this is not an easy organization to build, create, maintain. It's certainly going to require a lot of work. But what it does do is it allows that scale to happen for a lot of students. And the idea here is that as you guys are working with students individually with your own career services staff, this team now becomes a resource, a referral center, right? And an opportunity to scale for all students, as many students as you have in your campus, these opportunities to connect with industry and role specific advisors. So from that perspective, we're really excited about it. And I think that I think a lot of universities will see how this is an extension of what they're doing, certainly working in concert with the existing team that's there. I had a lot of universities who expressed interest in being able to have industry specific advisors on hand, but every one of them said the same thing to us. We just couldn't do that practically on our own, right? It was just, we could do a couple areas where we had our highest concentration of majors, but to do that writ large is just something that's impractical and unaffordable to an individual institution. So that's really what we've aimed to fill that opportunity gap with.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I can appreciate even at each university I've had the pleasure of working for, we have carve-outs, right? Areas of expertise that we can address really easily, but there's certainly pockets where a lot of universities could, really benefit from this particular industry expertise. So I can easily imagine, having listened to the description of the components, I can see how it can easily complement existing career services on campus. But I guess I was reflecting on when I am launching new things on my campus, whether it's a service or a resource, one of the things I've always really appreciated is just being able to benchmark with my peers, right? Calling a fellow director, finding out how it's going for them. And so, Andy, I wanted to pose a question to you. I was wondering if you envision that there will be opportunities for schools to learn from each other and perhaps also to even learn from some of the best practices and innovations on your campus at Wake Forest.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, some of the things I mentioned earlier were that we hold an annual open house at Wake Forest in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And we would be very interested in continuing that. Brandon and I had spoken about the idea of having at least an annual conference where any of the member schools would come together with us to learn about how things are working, what could be done better, how we might be able to share some of the things that we've been doing at Wake Forest in a much deeper way than we're able to do on a quick phone call. And also just sort of all learn together. So I do think that is one of those things that we do definitely enjoy and sometimes can be difficult when you go to a massive conference with hundreds of schools. It's sometimes hard to be able to find the people you really need to talk to. But I have a feeling we're going to have a sort of select group of people who might be interested in this solution, at least at the outset. So we should plan on really being connected. I think we also could imagine being able to do more events even like this, where we're sharing webinars about what is working when it comes to this type of solution as a complement to what's already happening inside a career center and on a campus. That's probably the number one thing that I know we'll have a little bit more time to talk about this, but I think this is part of the opportunity to create some systemic change around putting the concept of career and life readiness as a core outcome and experience of what you do in college and what you do in graduate school, or what you're doing with your constituency and nonprofits who are trying to help that group of people move through this part of life. I do think that we haven't been that clear about that. And so we need to actually have everyone in the system be part of that. And so I'm hoping actually that there will be deans and provosts and presidents who will say, I would like to actually now have this become a strategic conversation It doesn't just end up being the career office and their small office of 2, 4, 6, 8 people on their own trying to solve the problem for thousands of students. I just think it's a lot more systemic, and this is an opportunity to talk about how do we make that happen. So we would love to be in those kinds of conversations with lots of different schools.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because I think about just the opportunity that exists to have, academic advisors partnering with career coaches, the chance to, again, align with deans specifically by school and college and to really drive a strategy. So I think it's a very powerful model. I smiled, I saw in the chat that Nicole had quoted and said that perhaps we could have this as an annual conference. So we already have an idea for how we can come together, which is great. So I wanted to actually go ahead and pose a final question to each of you for your response. And what I'd like to share with the audience is that we definitely want to spend the balance of the time that remains just fielding any questions that you might have about Kaplan Career Core. And so when you look at your screen, you'll see Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Use that as the area where you would list any questions that you want to pose, and I will then take time to pose those to the panel so that they can respond. So you can go ahead and start adding those now. But my final question for the three of you is, when you think about where we are right now within our industry, why do you think Kaplan Career Core is needed in the marketplace today? So let's go ahead and start with Brandon, and then we'll follow with Heidi and conclude with Andy.
Yeah, I think, Nicole, in addition to some of the things I've touched on earlier, we're at a place where there's a really critical opportunity. And I've been enthused by some of the recent things I've seen over the last couple of years of what I'll call the bridging of career services and the core institution of what I'll call academics, right? And what we've seen are a couple things. We've seen more examples of career services offices reporting either into presidents directly, which was the unique opportunity that Andy had when he came to Wake Forest, or into provosts directly, which really, I think, sends the important signal that career services is part of the academic function of the institution in really important ways. And so to me, I think that is one of the biggest opportunities, is the blending of career services and academics in a way where it's just a fundamental part of the student experience. So that's very much why we've tried to bring the elements of Career Core to bear here. The academic courses is one of those critical components. And quite frankly, we view the industry and role-specific advising core as important parts of the academic programming for an institution, right? The learning and the support that can happen from it. So I think that's what I'm most excited about as I see career services evolving, is that bridging of the academic and student services world. That's definitely a promising frontier, and we want to help provide a solution that helps universities achieve that.
Excellent. Heidi, your thoughts?
I always think about the student. That's sort of where I live. And so when I think about this, there's this promise of providing tremendous student support, just in a very different way. And our own data suggests that it's challenging to engage all students in this process. Students have other time constraints, just the heavy schedules, academic work. We encourage them to be engaged, but then that creates its own time challenge. Many face very real life obstacles. Think of our student athletes who have incredible time constraints, as do our students who work. So this opportunity, this service expands the footprint and access for all students. I would say additionally, career course completion, our results suggest an increase in career-related activity and competence. And then there are the outcomes that we've mentioned, the employment, the salaries, and the pursuit of careers as an authentic choice. And then university engagement, just in terms of having our alumni reach back out to our current students.
And Andy, you can bring us home.
Well, I think as I alluded to, for true change to occur in this area, systemic change has to happen. It can't just happen by us doing a little bit more or maybe a little bit different of what we've always done. As Brandon mentioned earlier, career and life readiness can't be just an extracurricular activity. And I think more and more leaders and students themselves are going to be demanding more accountability on our part, and we have to find a way to make that happen. So I think because the students want and expect this to be a core part of the college experience, we have to figure out how to respond. And I think this is one of the ways to get the conversation happen. I saw that my friend Abra asked, like, so are you starting to talk already to president and provosts? And yes, actually, Brandon and I do know quite a few president and provosts who have expressed interest in what we've been talking about. I think at your institution, if that hasn't yet occurred, the opportunity might be for you to take the recording and the presentation and put it in front of them to begin to try to have a strategic conversation with them so that they might think about other ways to solve the problem. What we tend to think of the problem as career services is actually, are we making career and life readiness mission critical at our institution? And if we are, what are we willing to do in terms of finding solutions to do that? And I think historically, it usually goes back to the head of career services. So how many more people do you need? And you say, I need like 10. And they go, well, you can have one. Or you say, oh, I need to buy like 10 new licenses for software. Well, I can give you one. Or I need to like to figure out, adopt a new software program that's going to need some help from IT. Oh, sorry, they're not available. So, or you need to design it from scratch. And so you as a career director design something from scratch, and then you get recruited to go work somewhere else, and the school's stuck with whatever you left behind. Like, it has to be more systemic and institutionally owned. That has to happen from the leadership. And this enables us to actually have that kind of discussion with your leadership, with you in the room. So I do think that's the solution. And why I'm so excited about this opportunity is that we all know the world's changing. Everyone's feeling like we're all threatened, like less resources, everything's going online. Actually, it's a, keep thinking about it, it's a world of abundance. You don't know where the resources can come from if the leadership actually really wants to be strategic about how to think about allocating the resources that we have. So I'm hopeful that this can be part of a really new discussion for this like new era of what has been historically about career services, but actually something bigger than that.
Great, thank you, Andy. Yeah, and I think it's critical to have the leadership bought in. So we have a number of questions, so I'm going to go ahead and work my way through. And Heidi, I wanted to present the first question to you for a response. So Steve has asked about career prep, and he's wondering if it's best done in independent credit-bearing courses or in career seminars that are done within academic departments or programs. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think, well, having both the seminar and a course is very important. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. What I would say in the course is that there is an accountability that the steps are taken along the way. So we are certain that it's actually something that we can measure. We are content experts in our fields. And so embedding that kind of information in a course, we're able to actually measure different things than if it's in a seminar. Being in a seminar is great. And I would say what the courses provide us is a slightly different vehicle and tool.
Thank you. There's also a question for you, Brandon, specifically, and there's an interest in wondering about the research that you've done with Gallup and beyond, just across your career, related to first generation, underrepresented minorities, athletes, other groups who may underutilize career services. Curious about what you're seeing when it comes to career education, preparation, and network building to ensure that those groups are getting access as well.
Yeah, it's a terrific question. I mean, equity and access is something that all of our institutions have been committed to and are redoubling efforts to commit to. And quite frankly, I think all of us are still struggling to deliver on the full promise of that. I mean, it's incredible to see data that suggests that over the last half century, we've moved the percentage of students from the bottom quartile of socioeconomic status into higher ed. It's gone from 6% to 9% graduating from college in the last 50 years. Look, that's an improvement, but we've got a long way to go. When I say we, I mean it collectively. I mean it across all higher ed institutions. I mean it across organizations like Kaplan. So as we think about the research that's been done on career services, there is a bit of evidence, of course, that students who are underserved traditionally are underserved in terms of how often they access career services. What's powerful, though, is that when they do take advantage or when they are given support from career services, they rate it as much more valuable to them than other students do, right? So we know that if we can deliver on this, that it's especially valued. One of the areas that I've been most concerned about is in this category of family and social network access, which we know is a huge driver for things like job opportunities, internships, even the proverbial, I'll call it luxury of an unpaid internship. We know that that is a luxury for a number of students. And so one of the things that we're trying to do with the industry and role-specific advising and the industry credential tools that are on Career Core is really expand the access that all students would have to those kinds of services that in many ways have been reserved for those who have access through parents, through family, through connections. We still have a long way to go on access to internships and work-ready opportunities. And it's why I love to see ecosystem partners out there like Parker Dewey ramping up micro internships, right? We all have to do more work in that arena. But I think what's encouraging is that when students from underserved populations are exposed to career services, they value it more than any of the other students. So that ought to be motivation for all of us to redouble our efforts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this, the promise of being able to provide equitable access is critical. Andy, I wanted to present a question to you, and bear with me, my feed jumped a little bit, so I'm on a different area. So the question was around employers aren't quite sure, obviously, the direction that they will head years ahead. But the question was around, based on the components of Kaplan Career Core, what are you all doing to position to kind of anticipate the skills that are needed by employers, let's say 4 or 5 years down the line? How can this program help with that?
Great. You know, one of the things that I, again, really am impressed by having gotten to know Kaplan is that they have a whole team of people who are really connected to the corporate marketplace. And a lot of these certificates that they've already created are very much in response to what is in the market. So when something's hot, they know how to produce it. And when something's not, they know when to take it away. These are the kinds of things that I know that every university thinks, I wish I had a team that could do that. I wish I had a team that could keep an eye on the market. I know that, you know, some of us are fortunate. We have like a Burning Glass subscription or EMSI subscription. But I can tell you that every day I'm like evaluating that, you know, $10,000 to $20,000 subscription, because I don't know if we're really using it as well as we should. I can tell you there are people on Brandon's team who that's what they live and do. So they're going to be way more close to the market than we ever will be. So I will put that as one thing. And that the other thing is that at the core, I think all of us know that there's as Brandon had that one slide around, people need some general baseline of competencies to be able to be like just fundamentally employable. And we know what those things are, whether it be critical thinking, communication, presentation skills, Excel, like these are all kinds of things that we know every student even needs more of those core things. That is the kind of thing that Heidi has put into these courses. Our students are so much more confident about attacking the job market and feeling actually they've got the knowledge to be able to get that first job. But then also there's a big part of what we talk about, and you guys have all heard this proverb, right? If you give a man a fish, you feed them for a day. If you actually teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. These courses are about teaching students how to fish so that they actually have the hunger to want to keep learning in their own lives. They actually have networked with people who are actually in the marketplace right now, trying to figure out how to pivot in their careers. And when they hear those stories, they go, okay, I actually need to be more on my balls of my feet, on my toes, ready to change, because the world can change on me at any time. I think most students actually sort of deep down know that, but these courses definitely open that up. And Heidi may get back to this later, but the kinds of resources that she has them read are not just like get a job resources. They are actually like fundamentally academic materials that students have read in their philosophy class, in their psychology class, in their history classes, that they're actually drawing into having applicability to their own lives. So that's actually what's really powerful, is that we're almost like using a liberal arts framework of thinking to teach this that's different than the pragmatic get a job, do these things. And so I think it's a lot deeper sort of embedded into the kind of curriculum we put together.
And that's actually a great transition to a question I have for Heidi. And so the industry credentials have been echoed as absolutely beneficial, but there's a question about, you know, the human skills, the interpersonal skills. In what ways are those trained and developed through the program? You know, are there projects, are there opportunities in the curriculum to specifically develop those skills?
I would say absolutely. We do a lot of different, well, I would think I start first with one of the competencies that's always highlighted, which is teamwork. So we do a lot of different things, projects that are based in teamwork and understanding what those dynamics are that make things effective. I would say additionally, one of the pieces when we think about interpersonal skills is highlighting what those are for students as transferable skills. our students often come into a classroom with some of those interpersonal skills, unaware that there are ways they can capitalize on those to actually make them even more effective for their job or for themselves as candidates. The other piece that I think about is a mindset. And so while that is not necessarily an interpersonal skill, it is a way of thinking about how they communicate. And so one of the other pieces I would add is communication within not only the workplace as a young professional, but also the ways they communicate with one another and explain who they are as they enter into that particular job space. Oh, and let me add, a lot of presentation skills. I suppose that's also one of those pieces that is important for people to know. We have to have students be very comfortable both with their technology and using technology as a part of their skill set. So we do actually a lot of presentations via video, but they also, when we are face-to-face, they do a lot of presentations and they give one another feedback. That is another piece that we've learned, is that in terms of interpersonal skills, to give and receive feedback, that's a professional competence that many people don't begin to address until deeper into their careers themselves. So those are just a few that I would highlight as interpersonal pieces that are embedded in the coursework.
Great, thank you, Heidi. And very quickly, someone had asked about how many credits you are giving for the courses that you deliver on Wake Forest campus.
Absolutely. So each one of our courses is half semester and 1.5 credits. So often what our students do is they may take 2 in one semester, particularly the first 2. They try to take those before they declare a major in the spring of their sophomore year. But I would say the others are picked up along the way, and actually that's what we want them to do. We want them to continue having consistent career education all the way through, and very much a developmental or scaffolded kind of a process, so that they are continually being reminded. We know that they may take a little break in thinking about career at some point. We don't want that to stop. We want their access to career education to continue.
Great, thank you. Brandon, there have been a few questions about the pricing structure for Kaplan Career Core. Curious about if it's based on enrollment or if it's by service. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Nicole, happy to. And obviously, I'll kind of speak to the model, and, we're happy to speak with individual universities on kind of a more specific basis. But largely it's been designed based on the size of the undergraduate student enrollment at the institution. So it will be structured as an annual licensing fee for the member institutions that are part of it, and on varying bands of that fee based on the size of the institution. The only thing that might be slightly variable would be the selection of the industry recognized credentials that might be offered. Some of those are more robust and slightly costlier in terms of their per student price. So there's a little bit of range and variability in there, but for the most part, fairly straightforward. But the core set of services will be part of an annual license-based fee.
Great, thank you. Andy, there's a question I'd like to toss your way. The focus is on traditional liberal arts colleges, and the question focuses on the fact that a lot of times it's not easy to get a credit-bearing course. Oftentimes, provosts may not support that. What would your feedback be about that, and maybe how they could think about navigating?
I happened to see that question, and I was about to try to type an answer, but I'm glad I can actually speak to it. So I do think that there will be quite a few places where historically this idea of doing credit-based career education has been something that just was not acceptable. And that I think one of the things to think about is, one, it won't be necessarily in the physical classroom because all of this will be available online. So I think there's a lot more acceptability to online education. I think that's one. I think two, there might be ways that you could do this where taking the courses may become a gateway in order to get something else. So if the career office wanted to decide on their own, they could say, hey, in order for you to be able to use on-campus recruiting your sophomore year, you need to finish these courses in order to get them. So that could be like one example that you could use a policy change that actually enables that to happen. Now, if the school really wanted to really create a policy, it could be in order for you to declare your major your sophomore year, you have to do 2 of the 4 courses or something like that. So there are things like that, of which I know everyone who is who's in the career office thinking, oh, my faculty or my deans, that'll never get approved. I'm just giving you examples of the kinds of things you can do. I think that is another reason why you could see what will happen is that, as you heard Heidi's sort of proof of the results of these courses, of which one of those she didn't mention is that our students have said that by taking these courses, they're more clear about where they want to go academically. That has made them more motivated in the classroom. And that too is another thing that whether faculty, I hope they like that, they want more motivated students in the classroom, that would be a really helpful data point. Now they may say, I don't believe that data. Well, then what we would love to do is have schools who decide to try this to actually, let's gather some data together to show that actually this really does make sense. I think all of us who are in the career world, we know that intuitively that makes sense. We just haven't had the data to fully prove it out. We don't have the time to develop our own classes. We don't have the ability to get anyone to prove it. So if some of us come together and prove it, all of a sudden, it just takes like one domino to start the other dominoes to fall. Your domino may be at the end of the line, and I apologize if you are, but the reality is it's just, we need to get some people to just get it started. So I do think you're right. Not every school is in the same place with respect to the willingness of their faculty to accept major policy changes, but there might be creative ways that you can create policies that actually you have under your control that allow you to move in this direction. But I do think the more that we have strategic conversations with schools, the more likely you can create the kind of policies that will have higher likelihood of success. That is one of those things that I think has to happen in the process.
Nicole, I'd like to jump in on that too, just to support what Eddie just said. I think one of the outcomes that is particularly compelling for faculty is that within the courses, we are encouraging students to go ahead and consider a wide range of majors and disciplines, and to think about this idea that you don't have to choose a narrow academic path in order to have some of the outcomes you may be interested in. I think a lot of students now are getting pressure to choose what is called a practical major. And one of the things that we really underscore is this idea, there are many ways to reach your goal. You don't have to necessarily be in one discipline in order to get a job. So I would say one of the pieces that we are really passionate about communicating to our students, but also to our faculty, is that the courses emphasize the wide range of academic choices, that history majors can do a host of different things, that philosophy majors go on to business, should that be their goal. And I think for faculty that on our campus, that has been really helpful.
Thank you, Heidi. So Brandon, there have been a number of questions related to the industry advisor. So I'm going to roll 3 questions into one, because I know that you can handle it. So
all right, I'll see, I'm ready.
Okay. So the question is, if you could talk a little bit more about the interaction between the advisors and the students, how does that work? Will there be some future expansion to address the arts and humanities? And maybe just a suggestion for how would you envision a typical career office engaging the industry advisors?
Yeah, good stuff. So, although I know the slides I flipped through were pretty quick on kind of the major areas where we're planning to have advising expertise, one of those was around areas like the education field, higher education, and some other components. So one quick answer is that it's going to be beyond just simple, business track and industry outcome areas. I mean, we think about education, for example, as a major industry in the United States. So, and as I mentioned too, these things will shift over time as priorities from the member institutions dictate that. One of the things that we're going to be doing a lot of as a shared service offering is taking input from the members to shape the ongoing offering. So as we have real interest to ramp up certain areas, those are things that we're going to pay very careful attention to. And then you should remind me, what were the other components that I didn't address now in your 3-part question?
Yes, yeah. So maybe just an example of how you could see a career office leveraging the industry advisors.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could go in a number of ways, right? Like in a lot of the conversations we've had when we've talked about industry and role-specific advising, universities have used examples of how they've tried to connect students with alumni who are in those areas, right? And I am a huge fan of trying to build alumni-student connections. Where that can happen, that's great. And where there are alumni willing to connect and students willing to connect with those alumni, that is a fantastic effort to continue to encourage. I think as we think about this advising base, these are folks whose jobs are going to be every day waking up and providing a service to students, right? So as a reliable place that you can refer a large number of students to. I think there's a couple of ways that we think it will work. And again, time will tell in terms of how it shifts, but students are going to have access to schedule their own sessions with these advisors in small group sessions, right? And then universities will also have the ability at a staff level. So for example, Nicole, you and your team would be able to dictate where some students might need some additional support and actually make a bit of a referral, right? Where they can have some interaction back and forth from the information that students gathering from the industry or role specific advisor and some of the work that you're supporting that student with. So we're trying to set up in two ways: accessible for students that can just go and access it directly, and do so, by the way, in typically off-hour times. So most of our sessions we're planning to make available on evenings and weekends, and so beyond the kind of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday kind of office hour sequence, but also provide opportunities for career services staff to be able to identify students that might need some specialized support, and then have them kind of, dictate what that support is through the Career Core partnership. So hopefully that helps clarify a little bit. And then I thought I would just, before I forget, touch on the previous question. Andy and Heidi did a good job answering, but one of my favorite market research questions that I was involved with last year was asking hiring managers to think of the following graduates and which of these graduates would you be most likely to hire knowing nothing else about them. Interestingly enough, the one that won on this particular list was an English major with a designation in cybersecurity. So it's just an interesting point, Heidi, that goes to, and Andy, your comments about combining the liberal arts and career and professional development. What's interesting is that employers value the liberal arts if they can see it paired with an industry recognized skill or credential or some work experience. And I find that to be very encouraging, right? This is not an either or world anymore. Hopefully it's a both and world.
Great. So we have about 4 minutes remaining, and I wanted to just hit two final questions. So I was going to ask Andy to first comment on the intersection of Kaplan Career Core with employers and how career services offices might think about that. And then Brandon, I'll come to you after that. As you can imagine, there's a lot of interest in when does this program launch? How can I find more information? And so if you could be prepared to talk about that. But Andy, your thoughts on employers?
Great question, and one where I have my own particular philosophy about this, and it may lead into what we end up doing at Kaplan Career Core. But when we really thought about the biggest gaps, this area around education, advising, and certifications were sort of the big three. I know that every school would say, what about employers? And actually, whenever any school, especially small schools, say, if I had one resource to hire, what would I hire? I say someone who actually is really thinking about the employers. And why do I say that? And why do I actually think this is one that I would not recommend outsourcing, other than using tools like Handshake or systems like Parker Dewey? Like, I think that the reality is that your relationships with your employers are very local and regional. They're ones where there are people literally probably within 10 or 20 miles of your university or college that you should know. That shouldn't be outsourced to anyone else to do anything like that, because you want to have those people that you can rely on, that want to come to the school, that want to be in community with you, that want to actually show students that they will take them in good times and bad times, just to try to help students like along their way, whether it be mentoring, projects, internships, full-time jobs for alumni. And there are probably other certain cities for certain universities where you actually have alumni and others who actually also are in that network, where you need a small team of people, or maybe it's in partnership with the alumni office, maybe it's partnership with the fundraising office, but that can only be done on your campus. That's something I wouldn't advise outsourcing. So what I see is that we can give schools ideas as to how we've actually strategically organized to be able to do that well. Our employer relations team, led by Stuart Meese, who used to run the Career Center at Virginia Tech, like it is like Top Gun. Like they have things so well organized, and we actually have a NPS score of like 70 every year, which is like Zappos or like Ritz-Carlton. Like we're trying to find ways to have our team working in a way where our employers really feel satisfied. We'd love to help you think about how to do that, but I don't see that being part of the core solution of what we have in Kaplan Career Core.
Thank you. And Brandon, as you close us out, can you also comment on reach of the program? We have colleagues on the call today who are from outside the United States and wondering if this is available to them.
Great question. You know, we've designed it initially with plans to serve U.S. institutions, but the core elements of Career Core, as we've described it, are absolutely applicable to institutions in other countries and to, quite frankly, international students who are studying in the U.S. So although I can't say that it's going to be everything to everybody just yet in its kind of initial launch, those are definitely things that we're thinking about in terms of global perspective, global design. But right now, the focus is going to be on supporting U.S. institutions. The plan is that the service will be launched in this coming academic year. So obviously, as we think about the timing, that's to the timing question, Nicole. So, and then in terms of learning more about it, I'm just putting in the chat right now where we can be contacted. Folks are certainly welcome to reach out to me directly, brandon.busteed@kaplan.com. Also to my chief of staff, whose name and email I've put in the chat, Linda Gurnis. And then also our executive director of work readiness, Eric Kennan, whose sole focus is on working on university partners and their work readiness initiatives. So we'd be delighted to connect with you and set up time for a conversation. I certainly really appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar today. And Nicole, thanks for moderating. Andy and Heidi, it's great collaborating with you too. Thank you so much. It's absolutely wonderful to work with you.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And the information that we have provided will be available and will be sent out. I know a lot of people asked about the slides, and we are looking forward to the conversation continuing. So thank you for joining today.